So it's true about the agreement part for the two lectures, but I must say with lot of hesitation. Katha Upanishad is something very dear to my heart. That's true. I think probably many of us. But equally because one approach, which is the traditional approach, classical approach, is to take a text, go sloka by sloka, go from one chapter to another, and so on. Personally, I find that approach a little tedious, and sometimes I feel it's disconnected because it should be an expression of what we are and what we are seeking. This was the dilemma, because that's approach of going literally by the structure of the book. I like to get sometimes outside the frame, because I believe that these works, the Upanishads, they are not meant to be limited within a frame, because they are speaking of something which is beyond all frames. They speak of so many approaches through which we can go towards that. At the same time, it's a Upanishad which is very dear, because I think it's one Upanishad which tells us the goal, which tells us about what life is, what life can be, what is the path to reach that goal. The entire journey is something amazing. Very rarely we find such a beautiful combination of thought and substance, and very clear and very simple. It's absolutely step by step, very methodical. Say, if one reads the Upanishad, which of course is no doubt the greatest, one may say, in a certain sense, one gets the impression of moving from one mountain to another. But Katha Upanishad doesn't do that. Katha Upanishad takes us through all the peaks, one after another, and then gives us a very grand vision of the entire creation and what is beyond it. The authors, of course, are of both these great Upanishad, reportedly is the same, though they have a slightly different origin. So as we know, Katha Upanishad belongs to the Krishna Yajurveda. So Krishna Yajurveda has a very interesting story to it, also known as the Black Yajurveda. It's not Krishna of the Krishna, but the color part. And it is said that Yajnavalkya, the great seer, his grandfather Vaishampayan, once got very angry with him because he had read the Yajurveda and was giving his own commentaries or kind of explanations or understanding. And he got very angry with him that, you have taken all this and give me back. You must acknowledge me. Even those days, even great sages, it is not easy to conquer egoism in the nature. So he vomited it out. Of course, it's a symbolic thing. He vomited out means, he said, what do you mean? Take it back. So that which he brought out of himself became part of the Yajurveda as the Krishna Yajurveda, which is now taken as an Upanishadic text, otherwise originally from the Krishna Yajurveda. Then he went on to have his own, he meditated upon the sun. He said, why should I have borrowed knowledge? In a sense, it's a borrowed knowledge. He has received something which he is talking about. So he wants to have the authentic knowledge, the true knowledge. So even though this is something great, but in his search, he meditated upon the sun, the source of all illumination and light and wisdom, and he came up with his own, the truths that he received directly from that illumination, and that became portions of the white Yajurveda, and Isha Upanishad is one of the products of that. So we have the same Rishi talking about these two different ways. But as I said, in Isha Upanishad, he jumps from one to another. There are very few connecting dots, but here it's more like an explanation where he takes us step by step. The storyline is very simple, as he said, and that's one thing I love about this, story. Now, these stories of Upanishads, stories of Vedas, we have to understand it. They were not written like a novel, so there are many question marks which we can take up, and because those questions are also interesting. So the story starts very simply. There is this king Vajrashravas, also known in scriptures as Aruni Uddalak. So he is performing a sacrifice. So we have an outer meaning of the sacrifice, that you give away things. Like people go and give away their hair, some people go, a shirt which I am no more using, worn out, let me give away to somebody. So he's performing a sacrifice, and like any smart man, he's giving away certain things which have worn out, which have lost their utility. And this young son, maybe 9, 10, 11-year old, is watching his father. A very interesting setting. And he's seeing that my father is doing something which is not quite right. And like a very modern rebel son, he says, Dad, you're wrong. So you see how advanced a civilization could be, where a child is suddenly telling his dad that you could be wrong, and it's there in the Upanishad. And his father gets very angry. He wants to continue with the whatever he's doing. Then he points out, he says, you are giving away those cows to the gods which have worn out, which have no milk left, which are, very interesting describes, which have just one more time they can drink water. After that they are going to die. Their last thirst they are experiencing, and you are giving them away. So it's not fair. This is not how sacrifice is done. So his dad is getting angry, but he doesn't respond to him. So finally, to shake him out, the son says, all right, whom do you give me? So you see again, the father gets very angry. Anger has been the cause of so much disruption in life, and he says, I give you to death. Go to death. And so the son takes it seriously. He says, all right, I'll go to the abode of death. So the question number one that often people ask, that how does he go to death? What is the process? Now, I have a very simple medical explanation of this. There are many interesting things about Katha Upanishad which I find very useful even in medical practice. In fact, the very name Katha, there are several interpretations, but one of them is distress. So a person is in distress. Now, it's very interesting that some of the highest knowledge has been given in distress. Arjuna is in a state of yoga, vishada, distress. So he seeks knowledge, and a great knowledge is given to him. So this idea of, similarly we see that the Bhagavad Puran, though its origin is not in distress, in a sense in distress, because Vyasa Rishi is feeling distress. He has written a lot of works, wonderful works, but he is not satisfied. So he doesn't know why he is unhappy. He is a great seer who has written and compiled the Vedas, done a lot of work, but he is still unhappy. And Narada tells him, why you are unhappy? You have not written about the Leela of the Lord. Oh, okay, that's missing. So and again, Bhagavad is received by Parikshit when he is in distress. So, distress in certain sense, when he is about to die, when he is, got 7 days. So, he says, what do? I am facing death. Whether I should succumb, accept it blindly, or call my doctors, keep everybody 108 ready. But instead, he is advised, why don't you listen to the Bhagavad? It will liberate you from all fear of death. So again, we see this katha, which is distress. So what happens to this boy? This boy waits for death. As the scripture goes, that 3 days and 3 nights he waits at the at the house of death. I take it in this sense that, well, if you don't eat and don't drink for 3 days and 3 nights, waiting for death, you are likely to enter into an altered state of consciousness, where you can actually have a dialogue with death, if such be your intense aspiration. So, because people often ask, what is this absurdity? He is actually going to death. Because actually there is a transition. Suddenly we'll see in this Upanishad the great sudden transition. Go to death, and suddenly the next moment, it's not like how he has reached the abode of death. So somebody comes and tells death that 3 nights, 3 days he is waiting. He is a Brahmin. Brahmin means a seeker. He's just not ordinary person. He's a seeker. And he is waiting at your doors, and he should not be kept waiting like this. Seekers are not meant to be waiting. So death says that, well, I am so sorry, I didn't realize. You should have sent me your card. And Nachiketa, as usual, says, I don't have a visiting card. I am just carrying the fire in my heart and faith. That's my visiting card. So he says, yes, that I can see. And so, because 3 days and 3 nights you have waited, I grant you 3 boons. So the first boon is, he says, all right, very interesting boon he asks. He says, my father should be quiet and calm when I go back. I want to go back to him. Don't keep me permanently. I want to get back. And when I get back, he should be quiet at heart. It's very interesting in the context that later on, Yama tells him, you have chosen Shreyas over Preyas. What about this boon which he has asked? Now, this is a very interesting boon, that he chooses his father's peace, his calm, harmony over everything else. First boon. So you see, that's very simple. I assure you, you will go back untouched, unharmed by any of my fellows, and he will be at peace. All right. So next boon. Next boon, he asks him to expound about the heavenly flame. He has heard, he has read that, in heaven there is no sorrow, there is no grief. There is a state of consciousness where death is not there. And everybody is happy. Everybody is, all things are just wonderful. So he says, tell me about that flame. You must be knowing about it. And he says about that flame, that flame which has built this world and inhabits this. It's not just a heaven, it's also simultaneously a state of consciousness in which we can rise. And if we rise in that state, he also says that how you can, arrive at that state by performing a certain yagna. And it's described that there are 3 layers of bricks. You have to then light the fire. We'll come to the symbol later. And then you can arrive at that flame, knowing which all this goes away. There is no sorrow, there is no fear, there is no death there. So he is very happy and he does all the acts and says, I have lit the fire. Now, next step. Okay, he says, I'll give you a boon additionally. So what is that additional boon? Additional boon is that henceforth, this fire will be known by your name, Nachiketa fire. And second, he says, I am giving you a necklace. So, lovely necklace he gets of many, many flowers and all the different beautiful gems you can imagine. He gives him a garland. Now he says, ask your third boon. This was gratis, complimentary gift. So he says the third boon is very simple. Some say that when people pass over, they are, others say they are not. Now who better than death? You can tell me whether which is true. Now Yama hesitates. He says, look Nachiketa, I know I have granted you boons. Don't ask about this. Even the gods do not know it, because you are asking the subtlest of all knowledge. It's the most profound, the most subtle, and yet he insists, and then he tells him that I'll give you many other gifts, horses and cows and luxury and comfort and palaces and empires. And he refuses. He says, no, because all those things you will take away. Now, everything is so beautifully symbolic, and I want to know only about that. Then he starts expounding. So actually, the first chapter, this book is basically 2 chapters, and each chapter has three cycles. The first 2 boons are there in the very first cycle. And all the rest of the 5 cycles, or the 2 cycles of first chapter and the 3 cycles, relate to this final thing which Yama is revealing to him about that which is beyond life, beyond death, that which is beyond virtue, beyond vice, that which is beyond right, beyond wrong, that which is beyond bright and beyond dark. That is the third aspect which Yama expounds. Now, several suggestions are already there in it. There are several ways of looking at a symbol, but my way of looking at it is Vajrashrava is the old consciousness, the ego consciousness, which wants to give, but not with the full heart, not intent. Such a sacrifice is meaningless. It leads us nowhere. So often we go and we have a little extra money, we put it in the hundi, or we have something too much, Bill Gates Foundation, and write some money. This doesn't bring knowledge. This doesn't bring awakening. It's a good deed. All right. And as death tells, or rather Yama tells Nachiketa, that they who engage in such things, they come back, because they will go, because of good deeds, you will go to some place and you will come back, but you will be moving in the cycle of ignorance. So your aim will not be sought. So this is one kind of the old consciousness. Always there is a hesitation in the giving. It wants to extract every bit of every pound of flesh from life, every bit of energy. And then when nothing is left, you give it to God. Now, this is a retirement policy which, this is a one-way contract. The divine doesn't sign on a retirement policy. He's not interested. Only death can sign a contract with that. Say, all right, you come, I'll send you back after your deeds are just merit or less merit, and you will come back. So that is Vajrasrava, the ordinary old consciousness, egoistic consciousness, which is all the time turned around itself and wants its own benefit even when it sacrifices to the highest. Nachiketa is a young boy. Within this egoistic consciousness and out of it, there is born the psychic quest. So within us both are there. Vajrasrava is there, who wants to hold back things, and within us Nachiketa is there with a quest towards the eternal. And there is a fight which goes on. That's how, many of these like Kansa and Krishna, that's how I understand these stories, that they are taking place within us. So, but this new consciousness, which is born within the old, within the egoistic, mental, vital consciousness, it wants knowledge. It's not just that I give away for certain advantages. I want the knowledge, the true knowledge. So it has a quest. But for true knowledge, you have to die. Now this is the third symbol where you can't get true knowledge if you don't die to the ego. So Nachiketa must go to the realm of death. Otherwise it becomes very difficult to understand death. Here death is the Yama, the law, the guardian of the law. And we cannot know the true law, the divine law, the right law of creation unless we have died to the old consciousness. If we keep the old consciousness, we are not the adhikaris, not the initiates into the mystery. We have to die to the old. And many mystics speak about it. So he dies to the old. But what happens to the old consciousness? And herein comes the first boon of Nachiketa. That ultimately, once you have acquired the knowledge, you get back. Body is the base. Your individual life is the base. It has to be secured. And therefore, the old consciousness must be filled with peace, must be gratified, must be full of an inner calm. This illumination does not discard the old. It illumines the old. It pacifies the old. Old consciousness is the body, the mind, the life. And so, one day it must return. So, first boon is, keep this foundation secure. If we are very restless in our individual nature, again we cannot go into the beyond. So this security is very important. Sri Aurobindo would often speak of this, that the first thing necessary in yoga is calm, peace, equanimity. And he used to insist so much that if you don't have this foundation and you strive for higher knowledge, it won't just work out. You will come back again and again. So the first boon of Nachiketa is to keep this individual body-mind complex, which is the basis of sadhana, secure on the foundation of peace and calm. Not anger, not agitation, not restlessness. So it must be secured. And he has already told Yama that I will be coming back, and Yama has assured him. So this is the sense, innate sense of the first boon. So the first is this discovery. The second discovery, the heavenly flame, is the universal or the cosmic being. So we have three terms of our existence. One is the individual existence, and in the individual existence, we have a double soul. The soul is a way of saying, I am using Sri Aurobindo's terminology, or rather we can say we have a double self. One is the ego self, which is Vajrasrava, and one is the deeper self, which is Nachiketa, a self of aspiration, a self of seeking, a self which is willing to sacrifice anything for the sake of the highest. And then after the individual, there is the cosmic being or the universal being. And that too we can reclaim. That is also a part of us, but we do not know it. Because once, if we do not reclaim it, we cannot really become the real initiate for the next step. So after securing the base, the next step is the widening and the vastening of the consciousness, turning the individual into a universal totality. How do we do it? So there we have the Nachiketa fire, which is a threefold fire. So the bricks have to be laid in 1, 2, 3rd layer. So these images are very interesting, like in Vedas when they speak of lighting the inner fire. So, but they don't speak of the inner fire, it's a symbol you have to gather. So they say, pick up this wood, Arani, pick up 2 wood and rub them like this. They describe in great detail. Put one below, put other above, and do it. Now, what is it? This is the lower, which is turning towards the higher, and this is the higher turned toward the lower. When you rub it together, the flame is lit. Meaning thereby, when we bring our ignorant consciousness in contact with the higher consciousness, we can say when we do pranam to the mother in a very simple way or whichever way, then this fire is lit, because when the two contact take place, the fire is lit. Even in physical world we see this symbol. Fire was discovered like this. They were rubbing, and then by rubbing the fire was discovered. So the lower and the higher, when they come in contact with each other, the flame of aspiration is lit. So similarly, the next step is universalizing. So what is preventing from universalization? There are 3 bonds. Now this comes in another story in the Upanishad. I think we may have spoken about it. The story of Sonashep. So Sonashep is a man who is tied with 3 knots. And he is the victim of a sacrifice. No, it's not about human sacrifice. So he is praying everybody that please release me, please release me. And nobody is ready to help him out. Why? Because this whole fight between Vasishtha and Vishwamitra, and poor fellow has become a victim in the process. So he invokes God Varuna. Varuna is God of vastness. So when Varuna comes, he cuts the 3 knots, and it's very interestingly described. He cut the first knot and threw it up. He cut the middle knot, threw it around. He cut the 3rd knot and threw it down. So we have these 3 levels of being, the mind, life and body, which become the knot of the ego. We cannot escape from that. We cannot understand about universality. Conceptualize we can, but we don't live that experience. To live the experience, the fire has to be lit on all the 3 levels. It's not enough that I have my inner aspiration and the inner fire is lit. That will not lead me to that state. To universality. This is wonderful. If it is lit, it can, obviously there are many things that will happen. But this next step can only happen when mind, life and body, in all 3 they begin to seek that which the Nachiketa, the inmost fire within us is seeking. And that's the sense why the Katha Upanishad, Yama gives the name Nachiketa fire. There is no need to give a new name. Fire is known by many names. Grahaspati, Avanyak, many names are there for the one fire. Why this new name? This new name implies that it's not just the inner fire, not just the fire which is at the base of the matter, which is the Grahaspati fire, not just the fire of the mid-worlds, not just the fire of, which burns in the highest firmament, not just the supramental fire which is the home of truth. This is the fire which is lit within the human consciousness, in the mind, in the vital and the body. So when these 3 also begin to seek the highest, begin to seek the truth, then the knot of ego melts. So this is another process then. The Sonashep story, he invokes the higher consciousness and Varuna comes and cuts the knot. Here, while still in the lower with the inmost fire, the psychic being, all the 3 levels are affected, meaning thereby, which also comes in the Katha Upanishad, it says there are 2 activities of the mind. One, even the Gita speaks of it, one which is turned downwards and outwards. So most people are turned downwards and outwards. Even sometimes when they claim to be, turned towards higher things. Sri Ramakrishna puts it in a very beautiful way. And I love that simile. He says, many seekers are like vultures. So they are flying. Birds are symbol of soul powers. But where is their vision? Their vision is on the flesh, yes. On the flesh which they want to eat. So flying high in thought is not enough. That's why this wisdom does not come with scholarly thought. I personally feel that any amount of analysis of words cannot give this wisdom. There are people who are pedagogues, there are people who are very pedantic and they're very good. But they cannot get the key to the Upanishad. The reason is you have to read it with the inner fire. Nowhere it will be written, this is the symbol, this is the meaning. And with the inner fire, new symbols will be revealed. And I often compare the two like that. Imagine that somebody has entered into a dark room where in a very faint light one is seeing a script, an archaic script, and trying to make sense of it. Another, when the light is lit, the lamp is lit, there is an inner illumination. Now when it falls on the same word, the word reveals their intrinsic sense, which cannot come by any kind of conventional understanding. And I am glad, it's so nice that Vedas and the Upanishads are like that. And I would include the Gita also. They are not scriptures which can be only understood by the literal meaning of the words. It can even be misleading. That's why the Gita uses a very interesting phrase. Shabda Brahma Ativartate. Go beyond the word, written or spoken. How do we go beyond the word? He's not saying discard the word. It's not said don't read the Gita, don't read the Vedas. No, read it. But go beyond the word. These scriptural words, and that's because, just to take a little sidetrack, these meanings have changed, evolved, and as our fire lights up, new meanings emerge automatically, spontaneously. Because then we begin to see that, look, this is what I am going through in my own journey. That's how Sri Aurobindo read the Vedas. Sri Aurobindo didn't make a systematic study of the Vedas in the beginning that let me find truth by reading the Vedas. He didn't do that. He was having certain experiences, and then he found the confirmation of these experiences in the Vedas, which is, I feel, the correct way, that let the fire be lit. And when the fire is lit, because that's the meaning of Upanishad, whether it's Katha, whether it's Isha, whether it's Kena, Prashna, Mandukya, Mundaka, Svetashvatar, name any Upanishad. What does Upanishad stand for? One is sitting at the feet of the master. Second is going into the heart of the inner knowledge. There are other meanings also. But look at what it means. The first thing is Upanishad. So either we should be seeker after the inner knowledge and not just the superficial knowledge which comes through words. Or we should be sitting at the feet of the master, which again we see in the Katha. Yama tells him that rare is a seeker like you. And rare is, he says, master like me. He talks of. And when the two meet, then knowledge is born. So he says, in fact it says, Uttisthata, Jagrata, awaken. Find out the learned ones. Find out those who know. Seek from them. So it itself gives the clue that it's beyond the word. Go beyond the word. And that comes when the fire is lit. So when the mind is lit up, instead of downward and outward, we are all engaged with outward events all the time. And then spare time we want to, also get into the great and profound mysteries of existence. It doesn't work out because the fire is not lit in the mind. Mind is still too heavy, still too obscure. And unless that happens, it'll be very difficult. We'll understand something. No doubt it's a good thing. Sometimes the fire is lit by reading a wonderful work, but still that's not the real light. The real light must be that the mind should seek the eternal, the knowledge, the wisdom, the truth. And for that it must discard these frames in which it tries to put truth within that frame and labels it. That's why when people speak about schools of thought, so I find it an absurdity. What is a school of thought? It's not about thought, because in a certain context we cannot think beyond thought. But what does the Katha Upanishad speaks us? It says go beyond thought. Isha Upanishad says that if you have the thought of it, you know it not. Avigyatam vijanata, avigyatam avijanta. It bids us to go beyond thought. Now this is a new conception because we think everything must be within the realm of thought. The moment you put things within the framework of thought, you have actually finished it. The highest cannot be known by that. When mother was asked that, because mother gave a very nice definition, cling to truth. So people started telling, I am in truth, so and so is in falsehood. Somebody vegetarian said, I am a vegetarian. Mother, see, I am living by truth. And that fellow, he eats meat, he is not living by truth. So mother laughs at him. Says, they have all made their definitions of truth. And then she says, I am responsible because I told them cling to truth and I did not explain what it is. So the disciple asked, but mother, what is truth? He says, yes. Thankfully, somebody has asked me. And she says, truth cannot be defined. But if you are keen to know the truth, it will reveal itself to you.